Hey, what's up everyone? It is I, the man, the myth, the mustache, Tim here, with a brand new video for you. Welcome to part 5 of What If Deku Could Use Haki. I just wanted to stop by and say hi and remind you to sit back and relax cause you are in for a treat. Now, enough of me talking, let's get into the story. Midoriya stared at the entrance of the USJ, his expression being dead center between shock and joy. Standing there was a familiar old face, smiling without a care in the world as he slowly approached the stairs. The old man then got closer to Midoriya without slowing his pace. "Rayla, ow!" the green-haired boy shouted, as he was promptly cut off when the old man hit him in the head. "You imbecile! What did I tell you about using it in front of so many people?" the old man shouted, anger and annoyance ever present in both his voice and expression. Midoriya rubbed his head as he talked back. "Sorry, I had no ow!" But once again, he was cut off by the old man's fists. "Yeah, like I haven't heard that one before. Be better next time." The old man then calmed himself before he hit Midoriya over the head once more. "Ah! What was that for?" the green-haired boy shouted as he rubbed his forehead in pain. The old man returned to his usual grin as he replied, "Nothing. I just felt like doing it." The remaining stragglers of Class 1A bore witness to not only the man's entrance, but also how he behaved with Midoriya. The only thing that was left of them was shock and confusion. They could easily understand that the man was Midoriya's master, but he is not how they imagined him. They imagined some old guy walking with a cane on fragile bones, but instead they had a tall, muscular man wielding a sword. Rayleigh calmly turned his gaze towards the Nomu and Shigaraki, until a look of disappointment appeared on his face. "Did you seriously struggle against this bird brain?" Midoriya got annoyed at this question as he responded, "That bird brain can rival All Might in strength!" Rayleigh didn't change his expression as he responded, "Yet you don't have a single scratch on you." Midoriya didn't respond. He just scoffed in annoyance. Rayleigh continued by drawing his sword and saying, "Now then, are you gonna stop pretending to be exhausted, or am I gonna have to fight this bird brain on my own?" Midoriya just looked at the old man in more annoyance, as he said, "Did it ever occur to you that I'm not pretending?" And Rayleigh just boldly answered, "No." Midoriya just sighed, for he knew that there wasn't anything he could say to convince his master. The green-haired boy pulled himself up before he raised his fists into a stance. "How haven't you laid a single mark on that thing yet?" Rayleigh asked, proceeding to annoy Midoriya even more. The green-haired boy decided he was over Rayleigh's comments, as he answered, "That thing is borderline immune to shock-based attacks, and I believe it can heal itself." Rayleigh looked a little surprised, as if this explained a lot. The old man then cracked his neck before raising his sword, and saying, "Well, let's dance!" as he covered both his arms and sword with armament Haki. Midoriya did the same to both his lower arms before he and Rayleigh charged into battle. The two danced an almost perfectly coordinated dance around the Nomu. Midoriya was giving his punches and kicks, while Rayleigh was both punching and slicing with his sword. They did manage to deal a considerable amount of damage to the Nomu, but the beast would just heal itself and keep going. The students who were witnessing the battle were all in awe. Midoriya and Rayleigh's incredible footwork was beautiful, just as it was dangerous. Their movements were so similar to one another, it was easy to tell that they were master and student. It almost made them look like the same person. More students had joined in on spectating from the sidelines, those being Bakugo, Kirishima, and Todoroki. They all wore the same expression as their other classmates, unable to fully comprehend what was happening on the battlefield. Bakugo stared at Midoriya and got a little annoyed as he did so. His movements were similar to the ones he had used in the battle simulation, but they were still different. The movements he used now were far more refined, and his punches had a lot more weight behind them. This angered the blonde, thinking that Midoriya had been holding back on him even further. Midoriya and Rayleigh continued their death dance with the Nomu. They both used observation to dodge the attacks, while using armament to block or deal damage. But they were both getting sick of it, for their opponent showed no sign of even faltering. Eventually, Rayleigh raised his sword high above his head, intent on swinging it down at the Nomu's neck, only to be stopped. The Nomu threw a punch towards Rayleigh's hand, causing the sword to go straight up into the air. The beast then threw another punch at Rayleigh, who blocked it with his hands. Midoriya saw the sword flying high in the air, and he had an idea. He jumped up, grabbed the sword with a firm grip, and roared as he swung it. The Haki-infused sword ended up being wedged in the Nomu's neck, but Midoriya was unable to move it any further. This is when Rayleigh also grabbed onto the sword, infusing it with his own Haki, as he and Midoriya added both of their strength to it. The extra strength tore through the Nomu's flesh and bone, making it release loud and painful shrieks. Eventually, it fell silent as its head was cut off. The class looked on in horror as the blood-covered master and student panted and straightened themselves out. Rayleigh rested his sword on his shoulder as he stared Shigaraki down. "Your biggest guy is out of the game. What'll you do now?" Rayleigh teased, his signature goofy smile on his face once more. Rayleigh's intention was to make the villains realize they couldn't win, and then retreat. The plan seemed to be working, for Shigaraki was drawing blood when scratching himself on the neck. Then he suddenly stopped, and both Midoriya and Rayleigh looked confused. "Look out!" a feminine voice that Midoriya recognized as Uraraka shouted from behind them. Before neither Midoriya or Rayleigh could see what was happening, they felt that something very bad was coming. They both jumped away, just before a massive black fist collided into the ground that they were standing on. What they then saw both horrified and shocked them. Standing before them was the Nomu, its body fresh and new. At first, Midoriya thought that it had reattached its head to its body, but then he realized that the headless body was still laying on the ground. "This guy just doesn't know when to quit!" Rayleigh shouted as he brandished his sword. Midoriya was about to charge the Nomu with his master, but his observation noticed that a black portal opened next to Rayleigh. He could then see a hand make its way through it, so he moved immediately. Shigaraki came out of the portal, just in time to get kicked away by the green-haired boy. Midoriya then stood there, fists raised, as he was trying to hide his panting. Rayleigh pushed the Nomu back with a punch before he asked, "Can I trust you to handle that one?" as he pointed towards Shigaraki. Midoriya looked back at his master, panting as he answered, "Yes!" Rayleigh just smiled as he turned his gaze back to the Nomu. "Good. Now stop pretending to be exhausted." Rayleigh charged in, continuing his fight with the Nomu. Midoriya just ignored Rayleigh's comment as he turned his attention back to Shigaraki. The hand-covered villain was getting back on his feet, and he was furious. "You brat! I'll kill you!" he growled before he charged towards Midoriya. The green-haired boy responded by covering his lower arms and legs with Haki before charging into battle. The once raging 2-on-1 fight had now turned into two different ones. Rayleigh was doing what he could, dodging attacks while occasionally delivering his own. Midoriya struggled a little more. He saw what Shigaraki had done to Aizawa, so he knew the consequences of making physical contact with the villain. The problem wasn't with fighting Shigaraki, it was with fighting both Shigaraki and Kurogiri. The villains would constantly make different portals to try and attack Midoriya from different angles. Sometimes they almost made Midoriya hit himself. The green-haired boy was surrounded by a cage of black portals with pale hands coming out of them, yet he still persevered. Despite everything that they've had thrown at him, Midoriya hadn't received a single scratch from Shigaraki yet. The green-haired boy just kept using his observation to avoid any attacks that were coming his way, but he could feel how exhaustion was slowly crawling over him. Eventually, he decided to stop this assault as he dodged another attack. He then grabbed onto Shigaraki's arm, holding it tightly before he delivered a Haki-infused punch to the face. The villain bled from the nose as he was thrown backwards to the floor. Midoriya watched Shigaraki lie on the floor, not moving, before he lowered his guard. He then turned his gaze back towards Rayleigh, observing the remainder of his fight. Midoriya watched as Rayleigh used his sword to cut the Nomu's hands off, making it scream in pain, before winding up for a Haki-infused palm strike. Midoriya didn't know what Rayleigh was thinking, for punches had almost no effect on the Nomu. He was both shocked and surprised when he witnessed the strange aura that surrounded Rayleigh's hand, for it was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Rayleigh's palm then collided with the Nomu's gut, and appeared to do nothing at all. Then, the Nomu suddenly started to tremble, before blood spewed out of its mouth. Midoriya was even more confused now, unable to understand what was happening. Rayleigh's strike was almost completely ordinary, yet it looked like it had delivered serious internal damage. Midoriya kept staring at Rayleigh. He was so consumed by that palm strike, he had almost forgotten to notice a black portal appearing behind him. The green-haired boy tried to dodge, but wasn't fast enough. Shigaraki had managed to grab onto Midoriya's left arm, causing it to crack and crumble. Midoriya quickly jumped back, stopping the decay when leaving Shigaraki's grasp. He winced in pain as he clutched the now exposed and bleeding muscle fibers on his lower left arm.
"Oh, sorry. Did that hurt?"
Shigaraki asked, voice full of sadism and malice.
"Don't worry. I'll make it much worse for you."
Shigaraki charged at Midoriya, preparing his hand to grab onto his opponent once more. The green-haired boy gritted his teeth in frustration as he watched Shigaraki close in on him. He then clenched his left fist tightly as he shouted, "Do you really think I haven't felt a little pain before?" Before he infused his entire left arm with Haki and backhanded Shigaraki in the jaw. The green-haired boy didn't stop as he grabbed the villain by the shoulder with one hand and delivered a Haki-infused punch to the gut with the other. Midoriya still wasn't finished as he grabbed Shigaraki by the head with both of his hands before shoving a Haki-infused knee into his face. The villain flew back, covered in blood, barely clinging to consciousness with a lot of internal damage and broken bones. Midoriya's angry expression was still plastered on his face as his panting grew more intense than before, but he couldn't rest just yet. Not until the Nomu was out of the court. Rayleigh kept fighting the Nomu like there was no tomorrow, but there never seemed to be an end to it. No matter how many times he cut or hit the beast, it just kept regenerating, and it started to tire him out. The old man pushed the Nomu back as he tried to get some breathing space. Upon doing so, he saw a faint hint of green from behind the Nomu, standing as if it was waiting for something. Rayleigh immediately knew what this was and smiled. The Nomu then charged with the intent to kill as Rayleigh raised his sword. He then swung it, but let go at the last second, sending it flying past the Nomu. Everyone watching was gripped by terror, for they believed that Rayleigh had lost too much of his strength. The old man then proceeded to surprise everyone by delivering another palm strike to the Nomu, making it spit more blood. Then, before the Nomu could recover, something flew by. That something that landed, as it revealed itself to be Midoriya. The green-haired boy was holding Rayleigh's sword in one hand as he looked at the Nomu. The beast was completely still, until its head slowly slid off its body once more. Rayleigh and Midoriya didn't lower their guard this time. Instead, they watched as the Nomu's head started to regenerate its body once again. The master and student weren't about to let the beast make a recovery, so they walked up and used their Haki-infused feet to stomp the Nomu's brain to dust. The beast's head roared in anguish as the two kept stomping it without any sign of stopping. The Nomu eventually went quiet, as the brain was completely destroyed. Midoriya and Rayleigh then stepped away from the head, confident that the Nomu wouldn't stand up after that. "Gross," Midoriya muttered as he scraped the sole of his shoe against the ground to wipe away some of the blood and gore. Rayleigh looked at the half-unconscious Shigaraki with a confident glare, while resting his hands on his hips. The students were all frozen. They were disgusted by the gore, but they were also amazed. The sheer resolve and fighting ability of both Midoriya and Rayleigh was incredible. So much so, they didn't know how to react. The students were then surprised by the sound of facility doors being flung open once more, revealing a massive blonde figure. "Have no fear, for I am here!" the figure shouted, and everyone knew exactly who it was. Kurogiri realized they couldn't win this fight as he grabbed Shigaraki and teleported away. The other villains surrendered immediately, for they knew they didn't want to fight the #1 hero. All Might slowly walked into the USJ, as his expression went from anger to confusion upon witnessing the scene. The villains had already been defeated, and the center of the facility was drenched in blood. All Might's gaze then stopped as two figures were standing in the center, both of them covered in blood. The hero recognized them both as Midoriya and Rayleigh, and was relieved that help had arrived before him. Both Midoriya and Rayleigh breathed sighs of relief upon witnessing the symbol of peace enter the facility as they began to relax. Midoriya took it one step further by falling to the ground, trying to rest while breathing more heavily than before. Rayleigh just grinned at his student and said, "So, still pretending to be exhausted?" Midoriya just grinned back at his master as he continued to rest. The remaining faculty of UA, along with the police, arrived at the scene shortly after All Might. They quickly arrested the remaining villains and scraped up what was left of the Nomu before taking the students' statements. Midoriya and Rayleigh were brought to the infirmary, where Recovery Girl would check on their conditions. Other than some exhaustion, cuts, and bruises, and Midoriya's partly decayed left arm, they were completely fine, which left even Recovery Girl surprised. Midoriya was resting on the bed, when suddenly a deflated All Might came through the infirmary door. Midoriya and Rayleigh were a little startled by his sudden entry, but they were more worried about Recovery Girl seeing his skinny form. All Might then assured them by saying that Recovery Girl already knew, and that she knew about One for All. Both Midoriya and Rayleigh seemed to breathe a sigh of relief after hearing that. "Have you passed on One for All yet?" Midoriya asked out of curiosity. All Might nodded in response. "Yes. I gave it to a third year here in UA. Mirio Togata was his name." Midoriya only nodded as a response before All Might continued to speak. "I'm glad to see that you're okay. That creature must have been really strong." Rayleigh only grinned as he responded, "It was, but we're pretty tough." All Might smiled at this until his expression turned serious. Both Midoriya and Rayleigh noticed this change, as he began again. "I need to ask, what exactly is that power the two of you can use?" The #1 hero asked, his voice showing hints of this seriousness. Midoriya started to sweat a little, as Rayleigh tried to play dumb. "What are you talking about?" Rayleigh asked, not intending on telling All Might about Haki. The skeletal man only sighed as he replied, "All right, let me rephrase. Young Asui and Mineta claimed that young Midoriya did nothing but glare at some villains in the shipwreck zone right before they all passed out. It is very similar to what Mr. Rayleigh did to the sludge villain. Not only that, the two of you barely have any injuries even after taking hits from a powerful villain. That reminds me of how the sludge villain couldn't do any damage to Mr. Rayleigh." Both Rayleigh and Midoriya were frozen. They didn't know what to do. They were cornered, and letting out their secret seemed to be the only way out. The room fell silent until the sound of Rayleigh's fist colliding with Midoriya's skull could be heard. "Ow! I deserve that!" Midoriya exclaimed in pain before Rayleigh hit him again. "Ow! That one too!" the green-haired boy let out for some reason, not expecting a third one. "Ow! But not that one!" he exclaimed, but Rayleigh only responded with a cold, "You know why I hit you again." And Midoriya didn't argue. The two then returned to a deep silence, unsure if they should share their secret or not. "Don't worry, I'll keep your secret. After all, I owe you for keeping quiet about One for All," All Might said, sensing what the master and student were thinking. Those words hit both Rayleigh and Midoriya like a wave of relief as they let out a long breath. They then looked at each other and decided they needed to tell All Might about Haki. And that's our video, so thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. I hope you're enjoying it. Now, there are a few more things I want to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the deep, hardcore facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge of all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We the Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some cool jutsu action. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I want to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details are in the description below. Finally, if you're interested in what we do here at We the Celestials, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. Our only caveat is that we only accept members who are 16 years or older to join our crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interest by joining the Recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. Our Discord is a pretty great place to be, whether you be a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. We're always looking for members to join us. And so that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and please have a fantastic day.